Imagine two people stuck in the exact same traffic jam. Same delay, same weather, same outcome. They're both going to be late. One of them spends the whole time gripping the wheel, replaying the meeting they're about to miss, getting angrier by the minute. The other puts on a podcast, accepts there's nothing to be done, and arrives in basically the same mood they started in. Same external event. Completely different experience of it. We tend to assume that our mood is mostly a response to what happens to us. Good things happen, we feel good. Bad things happen, we feel bad. But if that were the whole story, the two people in that traffic jam should have had identical days. They didn't. And the Stoics built an entire framework around explaining exactly why. Epictetus stated this about as plainly as it's possible to state it. People are disturbed, he said, not by events themselves, but by their judgments about those events. This is one of those ideas that sounds almost too simple, and because of that, it's easy to nod along without actually absorbing what it implies. It means the traffic jam itself was neutral. It was just cars, not moving, for a period of time. Everything else, the anger, the anxiety about being late, the tension in your shoulders, all of that was added afterward, by a judgment layered on top of the event. And here's the part that takes a moment to sink in. If the disturbance comes from the judgment, and not from the event, then changing the judgment changes the disturbance, even though the event itself stays exactly the same. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself, arrived at a similar formulation. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Not the quality of your circumstances. The quality of your thoughts about your circumstances. This isn't a claim that circumstances don't matter at all. Obviously, some situations are genuinely harder than others. It's a much more specific claim, that within any given situation, there's a layer that's fixed, the facts, and a layer that's variable, your interpretation of those facts, and almost all of your emotional experience lives in that second, variable layer. Marcus Aurelius used an image for this that stuck around for 2,000 years for good reason. He said the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Picture a piece of fabric repeatedly dipped in the same dye. At first, the color is faint, easy to wash out. But dip it again, and again, day after day, and eventually the color isn't something applied to the fabric anymore. It's just what the fabric is now. This is a remarkably accurate description of how repeated thought patterns work. The first time you have a catastrophic thought about a minor setback, it's just a thought, it passes. But if that's your default reaction, every time, for years, it stops being a passing thought and becomes something closer to your personality, your default lens, the color the fabric has become. The uncomfortable implication is that you're being dyed by your thoughts right now, today, whether you're paying attention to it or not. The comforting implication is the reverse is also true. The dye can change. It just requires the same mechanism that created the original color, repetition, applied deliberately, instead of by accident. So what does it actually look like to change the dye, in real time, when something is happening to you right now? Marcus Aurelius offered an image for this too. Be like a rock, he said, that the waves keep crashing against. The rock doesn't fight the waves, and it doesn't get swept away by them either. It simply remains what it is, while the water breaks around it and falls back into the sea. Notice what this image is not saying. It's not saying don't feel the impact of the wave. The rock absolutely feels it, every time. What it's saying is that the rock doesn't become the wave. It doesn't get reshaped by every single impact, doesn't go wherever the water happens to be pushing it that day. There's a difference between experiencing something and being defined by it, between a wave hitting you and a wave carrying you away. Most people, most of the time, get carried. An irritating email arrives, and for the next 2 hours, that email is effectively steering the day, the mood, the tone of every conversation that follows. The rock doesn't deny the wave happened. It just doesn't let one wave decide where it ends up. Here's something to try, and it's deliberately small, because small is where this actually works. The next time something mildly irritating happens, someone cuts you off in traffic, a message comes across the wrong way, a plan falls through, try to insert a single second of space between the event and your reaction. Not to suppress the reaction, just to notice that there's a gap there at all, a tiny space between the thing that happened and the story you're about to start telling yourself about it. In that gap, you can ask one question: what actually happened versus what am I about to make this mean? The traffic jam is the event. Now I'm going to be late and everyone will think I'm unreliable and this is going to ruin the whole day. That's the story, built in roughly half a second, almost entirely optional, and almost entirely the source of how bad the next hour is going to feel. You don't have to be good at this immediately. The goal isn't perfect equanimity, it's just noticing, more often, that there's a choice point there at all. Most people go through their entire day without ever realizing the gap exists. Even noticing it occasionally starts to change what color the fabric ends up being dyed. So here's the idea to sit with. The traffic jam, the email, the cancelled plan, none of these things have a built-in emotional setting. They arrive neutral, and something gets added afterward, fast enough that it usually feels like part of the event itself. The Stoics spent a remarkable amount of effort trying to slow that process down, just enough to notice it happening, because once you can see it, you can start to influence it. This connects directly to something we touched on a couple of episodes ago, about fear and imagination. Both of these ideas are really pointing at the same underlying truth, that a huge amount of what we experience as reality is actually generated internally, and is therefore more changeable than it feels. Next time, we are going to look at the flip side of all this, not how to react to what happens to you, but how the Stoics thought about deciding what to actually spend your one life doing in the first place. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.